Welcome everybody to KeraClub 2024. I'm pleased to be here again. Welcome you to this event. Hopefully you'll find it informative. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of the country. We acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which the Save Sight Institute is located, and we pay our respects to the elders both past and present. Now, during the webinar, there'll be an opportunity for you to think about questions to ask because there'll be a panel at the end. So if you have any questions, you can pop them into the Q&A section of the Zoom, and then we'll review those at the end. Also, we are recording this webinar, just so you're aware. And we're going to share the link to everyone that's registered, and the recording will also be available on YouTube. But now it's my real pleasure to introduce Michelle Pritchard. She's been hosting the KeraClub since its inception, and she has a lived experience with keratoconus. She was diagnosed at age 16 after many years of procedures, including 3 corneal transplants, graft rejection, becoming legally blind, and then regaining her sight. Michelle is passionate about being able to support those who experience life with keratoconus. She's been has a long-standing involvement with KeraClub, as I said. And she's an internationally renowned violist, who's pursuing her lifelong dream career in music. She has completed a Master of Music at the Royal Conservatoire, The Hague, with cum laude distinction. Welcome, Michelle, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for that lovely introduction. And it's so wonderful to know that we are back here again for our 9th KeraClub. I'd like to thank all of our attendees. This is a meeting that in the olden days before COVID, we all used to meet face to face in Sydney, and that was also a very valuable experience. But now, in a way, we reach a wider audience on our online platform. KeraClub's co-hosted by the Save Sight Institute at the University of Sydney in partnership with Keratoconus Australia. The aim of what we do here is essentially to bring patients and researchers together and clinicians to discuss the latest advancements in keratoconus management, and to give each one of you as keratoconus patients and also carers a chance to feel that there is support and there is an ability to actually reach out, that you're not alone. Tonight's KeraClub, we're going to spotlight on cutting edge research. As we do every year, we get to do updates on what has happened in the past year. And we're going to have a special focus on contributions from the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry. We're going to hear about recent breakthroughs in keratoconus treatment, including studies on corneal cross-linking and the impact of keratoconus on patients' quality of life. This is actually a very special segment which will draw together several patients' experiences. I will give a more detailed introduction to each panelist as we go along, but I would like to thank them tonight for giving up their time and sharing their expertise with us. As keratoconus patients, it is my belief that the more informed we are about our disease, the better we can understand how to make informed choices along our journey with keratoconus. And this will also help give us the best quality of life that we can hope for. This is why I see KeraClub as a very important platform for giving support and gaining deeper understanding of keratoconus. And now I'm going to move on to introduce our first panelist. First of all, we have a very incredible person who has been so involved with us and makes everything move in KeraClub between the two organisations, Save Sight Institute as well as Keratoconus Australia, in getting KeraClub going. So first of all, I would like to introduce Himal. Dr. Himal Kandal has been the Cornell Research Fellow at the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry since January in 2019, after completing his PhD at Flinders University, Adelaide. Dr. Kandal has published over 100 research papers in reputed journals and has a special interest in patient-reported outcomes research. His research seeks to answer real-world questions in keratoconus management using the world's first Save Sight Keratoconus Registry. Dr. Kandal is passionate about mentoring and guiding the next generation of researchers in this important field, Thank you, Himal.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm really excited to present here today the cutting-edge patient outcomes research at the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry. Save Sight Keratoconus Registry is an international patient database of people with keratoconus. Now we have 112 clinicians contributing the data from 101 sites in 7 countries, and we have data from more than 40,000 visits from over 3,500 patients with keratoconus. The registry is really useful tool for clinicians to we have beautiful graphs like this. Just with one glimpse, the doctor can see the patient's journey in keratoconus, visual outcomes, or the corneal shape. Just in one glimpse, they can see like what is happening in the longitudinal manner. And the doctors can also use those graphs to educate the patients. Also, they can compare the outcomes with other doctors or other patients in the registry. And they can easily generate the outcomes reports, which will then be used for benchmarking to improve their practice. The other very important and crucial use of the registry has been for research, and we have published so far 26 research papers in top quality eye journals, and we have also presented them in over 80 conference and invited talks. This slide shows some of the publications that we did this year, screenshots of those publications. And this one shows some of the areas where we have published. I'll be briefly going through these areas. The first one is the registry has been very crucial to understand the treatment outcomes, particularly corneal cross-linking, and compare various types of cross-linking. We know corneal cross-linking is a standard treatment for keratoconus now, especially for the progressive keratoconus, but there are a number of variations possible, and we have published several papers looking at the efficacy and safety of various protocols. Today, Maria Qureshi will be presenting us her research looking at pulse versus continuous cross-linking, 2 types of cross-linkings done. And Jessica Wang will be presenting on how the keratoconus severity affects corneal cross-linking outcomes. Another very important area of research at the registry is quality of life research. This is one of my personal interest area as well. And using the registry data, we have shown that the quality of life impact of keratoconus can be worse than common retinal conditions such as age-related macular degeneration and diabetic macular edema. We have also shown in another study that in keratoconus affects mental health of patients commonly. And in the other study, we have shown that corneal cross-linking improves quality of life of people with keratoconus. Today, we have Leo Fan, who is going to talk more on comprehensive impact of keratoconus on quality of life. He will be presenting his study that was recently published in the Nature Eye Journal. The other area in the registry research is identifying the predictors of keratoconus progression. It is very crucial. We know that it is really important to identify keratoconus progression so that we can offer better treatments early. And we have from our study, we have found that younger patients and those with steeper corneas are more likely to progress. In another study, recent one, we have found that patients with higher intraocular asymmetry, higher differences between the 2 eyes in Kmax are more likely to progress. And today, Sophia is going to present on how allergy and eye rubbing are associated, or how they are going to affect in keratoconus. And the other area, the final area I'm going to talk about is our research has looked into the innovations in measurement and diagnostic tools in keratoconus. We identified that keratoconus outcomes research questionnaire was the best tool available for measuring quality of life in keratoconus, and this is the tool we use in the registry. I mean, it does have some weaknesses or limitations, and we're trying to make a better one. but among the available ones, this is the best one. And today, Ivy is going to talk about artificial intelligence in predicting keratoconus progression. This is another area that is emerging, and we are leading on this area as well. There are hundreds of people who are involved to make this research in the registry possible, and I would like to especially thank Professor Stephanie Watson, who has taken the leadership, and I would also like to thank all the funders without whose support it wouldn't be possible. Especially, we are fortunate to have funding from non-restricted funding to conduct independent and non-biased research so far. So I would like to thank everyone involved. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Himal, for bringing us up to speed on what you've been doing and what our other panelists will be able to shed more light on. I'd now like to move on and introduce Ivy. Ivy is a junior eye doctor at Sydney Eye Hospital, and she has enjoyed conducting evidence-based reviews with the Cornea Research Group, meeting fellow keen researchers and supported by Professor Watson and Dr. Kendall. In her spare time, she enjoys running, baking, and hunting down the best pistachio gelato in Sydney. I'll have to talk to you later.
Thanks, Michelle. Please do. I'm still on the hunt. So thanks everyone for having me. Today I'll be talking about artificial intelligence in keratoconus. Can technology help to predict its progression? And this was a study done with Dr. Kendall and Professor Watson as well. So what we know, just a brief background, is that keratoconus can progress at different rates and at different ages. That makes it hard for patients and their ophthalmologists to decide the best timing for follow-up and intervention. What we also know is that artificial intelligence has been used to help predict the progression of other eye conditions, such as that of diabetic eye disease and glaucoma, to quite a high level of accuracy. And that artificial intelligence itself can also help to diagnose keratoconus. But where that knowledge gap lies is that there aren't any current studies of artificial intelligence use in predicting the progression of disease in keratoconus. So a brief rundown of what we did in our study is that we looked at all papers and all trials studied up until July 2024. We looked at databases of both medical and engineering backgrounds to try and encapsulate as many of those AI studies as possible. And we looked at the outcomes, primarily that of accuracy measures, but also looked at characteristics as a secondary outcome, looking at those AI models, what algorithms they use, what imaging modality they used, and the number of images that they used. So overall, we had about 691 records identified, and sifting through all the ones that were relevant, we came down to 9 studies. Looking at the results of that, we found that of those 9 studies, 4 of those studies were multi-center, with 2 studies in Japan and 2 studies in India. We found that the total number of eyes that were included across all those 9 studies was 3,884, that the mean age of the patients included was 36.9, and that the proportion of males to females was about 65% males. Looking at the primary outcome, I've put in here a detailed table of what that showed, but in summary, what it generally showed was that there was a high level of accuracy with high sensitivities and specificities overall generally across those 9 studies. Looking into more detail about those characteristics of those AI models used, we found that 5 out of those 9 studies use something called neural networks. And that is a type of machine learning which is characterized by 4 main things. Firstly, that of 1, layers, that there's multiple layers involved, that from an input layer to an output layer and many different hidden layers in between. 2, that there's a linear process from that initial input layer until that output layer in a forwards direction. 3, that there are weights attributed to each of those data inputs or data nodes that then guides how much weight that single point then governs and influences that next layer. And finally, that there is training data to help check the accuracy of the model and help tweak that model. And often that training data is other images or other known information that we can guarantee. So in this example that we've got here, for example, you might think that this image here is that of a regular household cat, but it could also be a baby lion or a meerkat. But through those hidden layers and through those multiple layers, the AI model can look at the pixels, the shapes, the colors, etc., to finally make that conclusion that this is an image of a cat. More specifically, looking at the details of those studies, we found that convolutional neural networks were the most commonly reported in 4 of those 9 studies. And this is a specific type of neural network that has a specific architecture that looks at image recognition and pattern recognition that is great for looking at images in particular. In those studies, we found there was a huge range, however, of those layers that were used, from 3 layers up until 71 different layers. And there was also a great range in the number of images used, from 600 up until the 12,000 images. So overall, what we found in our study was that AI may have a role in predicting keratoconus progression with some promising results. However, secondly, that the quality of the current studies is highly variable and that it needs to be more studies done. There was often a variation in the number of detail and characteristics, the AI methods, and how models were validated that we want to find out more about. So why is this relevant? Well, it can help us to identify people who are at higher risk of needing future surgery. And secondly, it can help us to tailor follow-up times so that those who are at higher risk of future surgery can have that closer follow-up. And then what about the future? Well, as the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry, we believe can help to validate and create our own AI models to help predict keratoconus progression in our registry data of details and participants. And that can also help to contribute to shared public data sets that can help improve the accuracy of those models that are being used internationally. So to end, I've put in true fashion of machine learning, I've asked a random AI generator to show me what a future database for eye disease might look like. And this is that image that we've got here. But although the Save Sight registry might not look like this in 20 to 50 years' time, at least we know that there is a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivy, for sharing what is an incredible intelligence that we're dealing with today. And we can now use it hopefully for our benefit as well as keratoconus patients and the medical professionals. We're now going to have a brief poll, and Himal's just going to launch this. If you could possibly answer it in the next 30 seconds, it's on cross-linking experience. So you'll see that coming up, and if you can respond on your screens, that would be great. Meanwhile, I'm going to introduce our next speaker on the panel. Jessica is an ophthalmology registrar currently working at Liverpool Hospital in Sydney. She has recently completed her Master of Medicine in Ophthalmic Science at the University of Sydney, where she submitted her thesis under the supervision of Professor Stephanie Watson and Dr. Himal Kendall. So if you can just finish off with the poll, I will welcome Jessica onto the panel.
Thanks so much for the introduction. I'm excited to present the results of our registry study showing the impact of stage of keratoconus on corneal cross-linking outcomes. Cross-linking is a minimally invasive procedure offered to stabilize progressive keratoconus. It results in improvement of corneal structure by inducing bonds between amino acids in collagen fibers. This is achieved by reactions involving vitamin B2 in the presence of UVA within the cornea. Currently, there are no guidelines for the most appropriate time to proceed with cross-linking in relation to the stage of keratoconus. In everyday clinical practice, the decision to proceed with cross-linking is based upon progression of maximum keratometry or refraction. There's also a lack of literature reporting the relationship between baseline severity of keratoconus and outcomes of cross-linking. Therefore, we conducted a study aiming to determine whether stage of keratoconus at the time of cross-linking influenced outcomes at least 12 months post-procedure. This was a multi-centre study utilising the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry. Patients from Australia, New Zealand and Italy were included. The inclusion criteria were cases of keratoconus receiving cross-linking with at least 12 months of follow-up. Eyes were excluded if any prior procedures were performed. And eyes were staged with a modified Amsler-Krumeier staging criteria based on maximum anterior keratometry cutoffs, as shown here. 1,455 eyes from 1,102 patients were included. The mean age was 26.5 years with a follow-up of 1,107 days. At the time of cross-linking, 14% of eyes were classified as stage 1, 28% stage 2, 11% stage 3, and 47% stage 4. There were significant reductions in Kmax post-operatively overall as a group, and for patients classified in stage 2, 3, and 4 in bold, but not stage 1. With more severe stage of keratoconus, there was a larger reduction in Kmax. There was a significant difference in change in Kmax when comparing all 4 groups together with a small to medium effect size. Furthermore, all intergroup comparisons for change in Kmax were significantly different, except between stages 3 and 4. That is, there was a greater reduction in Kmax with more severe stage of keratoconus, except between stages 3 and 4. There were significant negative correlations between baseline Kmax and change in Kmax. In other words, the more severe cases of keratoconus had a greater flattening of Kmax following cross-linking. There were significant improvements in visual acuity overall and within all stages after cross-linking as well, as shown in bold. With more severe stage of keratoconus, there was a larger improvement in visual acuity. There was a significant difference in the change in visual acuity when comparing between all 4 groups together with a small effect size. However, only relationships between stage 1 and other groups were significant. That is, there was a greater improvement in stage 2 versus stage 1, stage 3 versus stage 1, and in stage 4 versus stage 1. But there was no significant improvement in visual acuity when comparing between stages 2, 3, and 4 of the disease. There was a strong negative correlation between baseline visual acuity and change in visual acuity. That is, the poorer the vision at baseline, the better the improvement in visual acuity following cross-linking. There was also a significant but weak correlation between baseline Kmax and the change in visual acuity. In other words, more advanced keratoconus correlated with greater improvement in visual acuity. Overall, 15% of eyes progressed at least 12 months following cross-linking. The progression rate of stage 1 was 25%, stage 2 was 15%, stage 3 was 8%, and stage 4 was 15%. To conclude, cross-linking was associated with improvements in maximum keratometry and visual acuity across most keratoconus stages, with a tendency towards a more potent effect in advanced disease. Cross-linking in stage 1 of disease may not produce optimal clinical effect, as there was no significant reduction when comparing final with baseline Kmax. The improvement in visual acuity was significantly poorer in stage 1 than for stages 2 to 4, and stage 1 had the highest rate of progression. But there is not much difference in the change between stages 2 to 4 in visual acuity and between stages 3 and 4 in Kmax, indicating that cross-linking earlier is better than in later stage. Therefore, optimal outcomes following cross-linking may be observed at stage 2 or 3 of the disease on balance of the potential risks of cross-linking. A future study controlling variables including treatment settings, measurement equipment, and follow-up time may lend to a more accurate analysis of the relationship between stage of keratoconus at the time of cross-linking and the resultant outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing us up to speed with cross-linking. This has been a very exciting new development in keratoconus treatment for me, I can say, because all of this is happening way outside of past the point when I've already had transplants done. But I know for future generations as well, what you are doing now is just so valuable for this disease. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. We're now going to move on to Leo. So Leo is also an optometrist and a medical student with a research interest in patients' experiences living with keratoconus. So this is actually going to be a very interesting reflection on what he's been doing with his studies and dealing with many, many patients.
Hi guys, thank you for having me and thank you for taking the time to come to this meeting and learn about the research that we're doing. So I'm here to talk today about the study that I did with Dr. Kandel and Professor Watson, and it's called The Relationship Between Keratoconus and Quality of Life, a qualitative study. What I'd like to first describe then is, what is qualitative? So we've already heard some amazing talks about research that focuses very heavily on numbers and statistics, but qualitative research is a bit different in that it explores people's experiences and feelings and perspectives. So it helps researchers better understand sort of the why and how behind what people are experiencing, and it captures the kind of things that you may not be able to get with numbers. And so, why did we do this then for keratoconus patients? Well, as Dr. Kandel mentioned previously, we've done some previous research where patients with keratoconus have had slightly worse quality of life scores on surveys compared to other eye conditions, and we wanted to sort of find out why. There was a lack of prior research focusing on patient experiences with keratoconus, And this is why we sort of did this study. And then how we did that was we went to Sydney Eye Hospital and we recruited patients with keratoconus. I then spoke to them over the phone for 30 minutes, just asking open-ended questions about their life and how the condition has related to it. And we took those interviews and we turned them into text. And the final sort of amount of words we had to work with was actually equivalent to a novel. We then analyzed that information to see what the common themes were between patients, as well as what the unique ones were, because we didn't want just repeated things, but unique things. And then we put all those sort of things together and we started to group them. And the results are sort of seen here initially in this word cloud. And right in the middle, you can see that, you know, it is frustrating. I'd like to sort of preface that I'm not someone with a lived experience with keratoconus. And I approach this with the utmost respect, of course, to all the viewers. But I'm just going to convey sort of what the people who were so kind to participate and share their stories, what they told me. And so these are sort of the themes we saw around keratoconus. So its effect on driving, people's career and education, their enjoyment of life, their experiences with healthcare, their symptoms themselves, the financial stresses, as well as the social impacts of the condition. And I'll go through it briefly with some quotes. So the first one was driving. I'm sure we can all feel that driving is just incredibly important. And a lot of participants mentioned that keratoconus seemed to have some sort of effect on it. Even when they could drive, sometimes people felt a bit scared as well. In terms of career and education, I'm sure a lot of people, and especially some of my panelists, have accomplished amazing things with their condition, but it does sort of make things a bit harder. And that was reflected in a lot of the participants talking about their work environments, even when they're quite young and in school and teachers didn't quite understand them. And then there was also the social effects, I'm sure everyone can relate to in the audience, where sometimes it might be a bit harder to recognize someone. Sometimes you might not want to go outside to meet with friends because it's quite hard to see at night and it's difficult. And sometimes it's just, you know, you can't feel like you want to have to explain your condition constantly to every new person you meet. There was also the enjoyment of life element. So for some patients, they felt that because their vision was a bit poorer, they were missing out on some things, for example. So like going on a holiday and sightseeing, maybe playing sport to the best of their ability, things like that. And there was also the healthcare experience, which was really informative to me as an optometrist and doctor in the future. Just the sense of, you know, when you're first going to the hospital at such a young age and finding it quite scary, and as well as the experience of going through different operations. And then there were the financial impacts. As we know, it's quite expensive to update your glasses and contact lenses to even travel to and from Sydney. And finally, just the burden itself of the symptoms. So things not just like blurry vision, but irritation around the eyes, feeling a bit unsafe walking around at night, those things. And so while it does sound all quite negative, well, what does this mean for patients with keratoconus? Well, because we've got this research published and we've done it, we now have sort of a much greater understanding of the challenges that patients with keratoconus face. We're using this to develop a better survey to assess how keratoconus affects people's lives. Like Kamal mentioned before, there are current surveys, but they don't quite assess some of the new things that we've uncovered in these talks with patients. And when everyone, you know, who's involved in your treatment, so from, you know, your doctors to your nurses, optometrists, everyone, if they understand you a bit better in terms of how it affects your life outside of the consult room or where they first meet you, they can make definitely better choices about your care. And so that's the update I have. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen.
Thank you so much, Leo, for sharing those insights, and to those patients who also contributed. It's really important that we are able to share with the medical teams who are really interested in how to make our lives better as well. I would now like to move on to introduce Maria Qureshi. So Maria is also going to share with us her experience in this field, and she's a newly graduated medical student involved with research at the Save Sight Institute. Thank you so much, Maria.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you everyone for having me. I'm going to be talking about new methods of cross-linking, specifically a study we've done on pulse cross-linking. But first, I'm going to give a little bit of background as to what cross-linking is. I won't delve too deep because I know Jessica has covered it, and even in the poll, a good portion of you are very familiar with cross-linking. But quickly to recap, it's a surgical technique that stabilizes the cornea and prevents it from thinning or warping further through a chemical reaction between UVA light and vitamin B2, otherwise known as riboflavin. So there are several protocols that are currently available in the realm of cross-linking and quite a few options. So the basic cross-linking that you might be familiar with is the Dresden protocol, otherwise known as traditional cross-linking, where both the vitamin B and the UVA are applied for 30 minutes each. So it can actually be quite a long procedure. The next form is accelerated, and this is where higher energies are delivered in shorter time frames, just to quicken up the speed of overall cross-linking, but the end result should be the same with the amount of energy delivered. The third is epi-on. Now, this is a GIF showing the first step of traditional cross-linking, where the epithelium or the very first layer of the cornea is removed. And in epi-on procedures, this step is skipped, so it's more comfortable with a faster recovery, but it ultimately means that there's less penetration of the chemicals into the actual cornea. Fourthly, we have combined, which is cross-linking combined with other refractive surgeries or laser as well, just to correct refractive errors on top of general stabilization. We have custom. You can have customized cross-linking where the topographical guidance is used, and this is because there are many different patterns of keratoconus that can emerge. So for some patients, it might be better to target specific areas more than others instead of providing the treatment uniformly across the eye. So the patient's unique curvature is mapped, and then higher concentrations of energy are targeted to the steeper areas that are shown in red. And then with oxygen enhanced, when we shine light into the patient's eye for minutes at a time, the oxygen in the general environment surrounding the cornea can be depleted during the procedure. In chemical kinetics, we know that the presence of oxygen can actually help produce stronger bonds between the chemicals. So some protocols experiment with the use of goggles or masks that provide supplemental oxygen during the procedure. And finally, we have pulse cross-linking, which was a study we looked at in greater detail. And this is another method of allowing more oxygen into the procedure. But instead of using goggles or an eye mask, the UVA light is pulsed intermittently into the patient's eyes, such that the natural oxygen environment isn't depleted. As pulse cross-linking is a relatively newer protocol and used less widely than traditional methods, the team at the Save Sight Institute looked at how well it works for treating progressive keratoconus and aimed to help doctors and patients decide whether it would be a good fit for them. The first way we did this was to combine the research available globally that looked at how patients performed with pulse cross-linking in general, and then also in comparison to continuous cross-linking, which is the same exact cross-linking just without the pulsing. We published these findings this year, combining 29 papers looking at nearly 3,000 eyes. And the main results of the global data were that pulse cross-linking showed a visual acuity improvement of 1 line on a Snellen chart in the first 12 months. It also showed a 0.75 diopter reduction in the steepest part of the cornea, so flattening the curve in an effective manner. When comparing it to non-pulse cross-linking, there was no significant difference between the two groups at 12 months in terms of overall performance in these areas. We also found that pulse cross-linking, which was customized to the patient's unique curvature, showed the best results. Of course, it is important to note there were limitations in the study. Many protocols with different energy levels and exposure times were used, which makes a direct comparison a little bit difficult. And 12 months is considered a short follow-up time in a lifelong disease like keratoconus. To combat this, we are currently conducting a study analysing the data of patients that receive pulse cross-linking at the Sydney Eye Hospital and New Zealand hospitals as well, associated with the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry. As it is an ongoing registry, we will have access to data at 12 months, 5 years and beyond, and will continue reporting longer-term effects as more time passes. So far, we have a total of 539 eyes from 443 patients across Australia and New Zealand. The study is not yet published, but the preliminary findings at this stage show the visual acuity at baseline and at 12 months for both the pulsed and non-pulsed patients. And as you can see in the graphs, the pulsed patients on average have a higher visual acuity scores to begin with because they are a smaller group. But by 12 months, the change from baseline to 12 months is actually very similar across the two groups. With this is consistent with the global data findings as well. In terms of flattening the cornea at its steepest part, and the pulse group had more of a flattening effect in the first year compared to the non-pulse patients. And finally, if we look at the minimum corneal thickness, we can see the general drop that occurs immediately after the procedure in both of these, both groups. But by 12 months, the pulse group minimal thickness has increased compared to where we started in a way that the non-pulse has not recovered. Again, the key point for us would be to see if these trends continue at the 5-year mark as a better indication of long-term performance. So finally, to conclude, we know that pulse cross-linking is a safe and effective option. Whether you receive pulse or non-pulse would be a collaborative decision between you and your doctor, but should yield similar outcomes. And the Save Sight Registry study will offer longer follow-up data as more time emerges. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing with us, and we wish you all the best for your newly graduated life into your specialty. It's always really interesting to hear what's actually happening with these studies with cross-linking as well. Now we're going to move on to hear from Sophia Moshigov. Sophia is an ophthalmology resident at the Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital with a keen interest in corneal research. Her current work focuses on the impact of eye rubbing, allergy, and atopy in the progression of keratoconus. Passionate about advancing understanding and treatment in this field, she aims to contribute meaningful insights to improve patient outcomes in corneal health. Welcome, Sophia.
Thanks, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. I'll be discussing allergy and eye rubbing in keratoconus. So I did some research earlier on in the year with the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry, looking at keratoconic eyes in eye rubbers versus those who didn't rub their eyes, in particular the demographics, disease severity, and the vision-related quality of life. As part of that, I also looked at the correlation between allergic eye disease and keratoconus in people who did rub their eyes. So as I mentioned, I use Save Sight Keratoconus Registry data from a number of practices, and over 1,000 eyes were included. We took the demographic data from that population, as well as the visual acuity, corneal measurements, and quality of life. Through this, we found that people with allergic eye disease were significantly more likely to rub their eyes with keratoconus, and this was not correlated with the visual acuity or the corneal measurements. So what's the relationship between allergic eye disease and keratoconus? Well, any allergic eye disease can trigger common symptoms like redness, swelling, itching, and tearing, and this sort of irritation predisposes people to rub their eyes for temporary relief. However, when this rubbing becomes very frequent and also very forceful over time, it may contribute to the keratoconus development or progression. It's also important to define the types of allergic eye diseases that can cause this irritation because they can lead to the development of keratoconus down the track. But also in the literature, there's some variation in terms of exactly which types of allergy and atopy can contribute to this. Although we can think about it conceptually, any sort of atopic allergic condition that promotes irritation of the eyes can lead to this eye rubbing behavior. But really, it's important to understand so we can manage it properly and also prevent complications down the track. So in terms of managing allergic eye disease, we have a number of ways we can go about it: topical, systemic, and alternative therapies. So one of the most simple things to do is preventative measures, reducing exposure to common allergens, things like wearing sunglasses outside, changing bed linen to reduce dust mite exposure, animal hair. But in terms of topical therapies we can use, starting simply with cold compresses or lubricant drops that can be refrigerated to try and reduce that intense itch that comes from the eyes. And then thinking about other eye drops, so things like Zaditin or Zyrtec, which are antihistamines. We can then think about less commonly used drops, things like mast cell stabilizers, which try and reduce the amount of histamine that's released in the eye and contributes to that strong itch, steroid eye drops, and also new biologics like tacrolimus. If that doesn't work, or if there are allergic diseases that are affecting the whole body as well as the eyes, you may need systemic therapies. So oral antihistamines or also oral steroids, for example, with severe eczema, although these naturally do come with more side effects. So there have been new drugs which have been developed, like biologics such as omalizumab. There are as well non-pharmacological strategies to manage eye rubbing behavior, in particular behavior modification. So things like habit awareness, something like keeping an eye rubbing diary just to be aware of how often you're doing it, the duration, how forceful you are, and competing responses. So thinking about what you can do instead. So using those cold compresses, those lubricant drops. Also developing motivation, so being aware of the risks of eye rubbing and what it can do to the keratoconus. And finally, social support. So especially with children, having the family involved to help them distract themselves or do other strategies rather than rub the eyes. Eye rubbing can also be associated with some other conditions like OCD, and this is when a multidisciplinary team approach can be helpful, like using a psychologist. So in summary, those with allergic eye diseases do rub their eyes more frequently than those without. This may contribute to keratoconus development and progression, and so identifying strategies to treat the allergy and reduce that drive to itch the eyes may be worthwhile at those with keratoconus.
Thank you, Sophia. As an eye rubber when I was a kid, I can warn people that, yes, it definitely contributes to keratoconus. It's now my pleasure to welcome our next panelist. But before I do, could we just remember to use the question and answer section of the Zoom to submit your questions if you have any, and these will be addressed by the panel at the end of our session. I'd very much appreciate that. Thank you. So we now move on to Gillian Campbell. Gillian Campbell, owner and director of Richard Lindsay and Associates in Baldwin North in Melbourne. And she's a passionate optometrist known for her expertise, especially in contact lenses and managing complex eye conditions such as keratoconus and pediatric aphakia. I hope I said that correctly. Tell me later. With experience as a lecturer at the University of Melbourne and an invited lecturer for the ACO Advanced Certificate in Contact Lens Fitting, Gillian educates the next generation of optometrists and speaks at conferences across Australia. Recently, she developed lectures for China on advanced contact lens fitting. Known for her dedication and industry experience, she is often consulted for insights on new technology and lenses, ensuring her patients receiving the best in care and innovation. Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. I'm going to get straight into it because I've got a lot of stuff I want to cover, and in the interest of time. So first thing I wanted to show everyone today is one of the most common things that I'm asked by my patients is what exactly is keratoconus? How does it affect my anatomy? And how does it impact my vision? And my patients really struggle to explain that to other people and why they can't just slap on a pair of glasses or have laser surgery to fix their issues. And this resource, which I love, by One Right Eye, is really, really helpful at explaining the actual changes to the cornea that happen with different stages of keratoconus. And so this model of the eye, you can see the high drops on the side with really, really advanced cases. But what it shows also is actually the impacts that patients experience as the keratoconus gets more advanced. So I think this is a really good resource. It's free to access. And I think if you are trying to explain to someone, it's something really good to look at. But really what I want to talk about is contact lens management and how it's changed over the last, decade, and even how it's changing in the future. And it's changing really quickly. So contact lens management for keratoconus, there was a time where patients who, would be in the small rigid lenses and didn't have any other options, and that was the only type of contact lens they could wear. But now we have so many different options. And this slide really shows the framework for the management that we use at each different sort of stage of keratoconus. But there's no one size fits all approach, and really each lens type is really nuanced. It takes into account when we choose a certain option, the patient's lifestyle, whether they can insert the lenses or remove the lenses, how sensitive their eyes are, like really atopic, allergic patients maybe have very more sensitive eyes than others, and you might start with soft lenses to ease them into wearing rigid lenses. There's a lot of things other than the patient's shape of their eye that impact what type of contact lenses we use. And, it's also lifestyle, like for example, a police officer might need to sleep in their contact lenses at nighttime, and that impacts what type of contact lenses we use. I think one of the biggest myths that I come across with patients as well is that they can't wear glasses. And, you know, mild to moderate keratoconus, there are situations and certain levels are completely achievable to actually create a pair of glasses where they can see. But as you get more advanced into the moderate stages, these glasses are usually used, for example, in situations where they might be catching a plane, or if their eyes are irritated and they have conjunctivitis, or if they need to wake up in the middle of the night, they're not good, maybe necessarily good enough to give patients vision for everyday use, but certainly they have a place in the management of keratoconus. And often it takes a long time to do those prescription checks, but it's worth it, because if you become sick or unwell or something happens, you can still see, you can still function. And it's very, very, very helpful for improving quality of life. So people shouldn't override glasses as a backup option. But really the biggest thing that's changed with contact lenses is the development of scleral lenses. And we're going to talk about that today and some new developments that are coming through as well. So soft lenses, we fit soft lenses a lot with keratoconus, usually mild types of keratoconus, great for comfort, easy to insert and remove, may not give as sharp vision as what rigid lenses can, and they can fluctuate with what patients can actually see if they have a lot of astigmatism and the patient blinks and their vision can change. But we do have a variety of new custom-made lenses specifically for keratoconus that we can use, like KeraSoft, for example, which are quite thick, Marconus lenses and Bifinity XR. So soft lenses have even come a long way as well. Rigid lenses, so we usually, you probably will all refer to corneal lenses as RGPs, and that term really is redundant now, because all rigid contact lenses are RGPs. It means rigid gas permeable lenses, and it just means oxygen gets to the cornea. So all hard lenses are RGPs. So really, we call them corneal lenses because these ones sit on the cornea, corneal scleral lenses because they sit on the cornea and the sclera, or scleral lenses. And scleral lenses just rest on the white part of your eye, and they vault the cornea entirely. And so they really are very comfortable lenses because there's no movement beneath them. We also have hybrid lenses, which have a hard center and a soft skirt. And hybrid lenses are great. They're less popular now because of scleral lenses. They're probably a little bit more expensive than even scleral lenses because you have to replace them more regularly. Most patients replace them every 6 to 9 months. They're about sort of $400 to $500 a lens, whereas scleral lenses can be anywhere from $600 to $1,200. And it really depends on what type of design you're fitting, and more advanced technology will cost more as well. I often get patients wanting to know the difference between like Rose K and other lenses, but really they're just different brands of hard lenses, and you will get good outcomes with a Rose K or a Kera lens. This is really important. I wanted to bring this up with everyone today, is that if you are getting recurrent scratches or abrasions with hard lenses, this is not normal. Flat fitting lenses, if they are fit, pushing the cone inwards, they can cause friction and lead to scarring. And yes, they will give you better vision while you're wearing them, but they're pushing the pointiest part and the thinnest, most delicate part of the cornea inwards. And that can actually lead to mechanical insult and even keratoconus progression. So long-term risk of infection, and it can lead to earlier grafts being needed to require. Scleral lenses, way better comfort than all the other lenses on the market now. Really stable vision. Many designs, have sealed fits so dust can't get underneath them. There's a lower risk of developing like a ptosis or a droop over time with these lenses because there's no friction underneath the lid. It's now the most common used type of rigid lens on the market, and many patients that we were deemed unfittable now, we can completely and easily fit them with scleral lenses. And insertion removal is a lot more challenging with this type of lens, and not all patients can do that. And we are adamant in our practice, we teach patients how to insert and remove these before they order them. We never assume, because incorrect teaching or not doing it properly can lead to bubbles, fogging, oxygen issues, and even eye drops in some cases. There is new technology, as I said. So we have a SMAP scleral topographer. This machine is so cool. What it can do is it maps the whole sclera, the entire cornea, it stitches it all together, it creates a digital mold of your eye, and then from that we can create a contact lens that sits on the front of your eye. And it's basically a free-form design scleral lens. So it has to be inserted in a certain way, and it's really, really comfortable. Patients get less issues with fogging, mucus, debris under these lenses because there's a really nice alignment on the eye. And also you can fit really advanced eyes in a healthy way with this type of lens. This is a patient who's had, you can see redness on this side with a cutout in the lens because they have a sun damage on that eye called a pinguecula, and we've designed a lens to fit over that nice and snug. There's also mold versions. This is a iPrint Pro. It's not available in Australia yet. It is coming. It creates a mold of the surface of the eye. Then we send that away and a lens is made based off that mold. But what is most exciting, what I'm most excited about coming forward in the next 12 months is correction of higher order aberrations. And it's something patients ask me about regularly. So what higher order aberrations are optical imperfections beyond standard vision correction. They cause issues like ghosting, starbursting, halos, and they persist even when patients are wearing rigid lenses. For example, even when they've got their scleral lenses on. It may not impact their daily vision a lot, but some patients really are bothered by how sharp or clear their vision actually feels. And there's new technology called waveguide no bits, just to name two. They measure those higher order aberrations, and we can sort of inverse them and put them on the surface of the scleral lens to neutralize those aberrations. So it's going to be great. But it is new technology, and I know from my American colleagues that it takes quite a few visits to get this right because they have to be really stable, but it's taking the vision to the next level, the visual quality. So you might read to the same level of the chart, but it's the quality that's going to be better, and that is exciting. And there's also new technology with scanning. This is a SciLight, which is a new OCT machine. It's Australian designed, and we're able to use this now to actually image how scleral lenses fit on the eye even more accurately. So there is awesome new technology on the way as well.
Thanks so much, Gillian. That's very, very, very interesting for people like me who've gone through many scleral lens fittings and things, just to know that there's also new technology as well. But we're very grateful for people like you with patients to try and get the patients fitted properly. I now move on. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Larry. Now, Larry Kornhauser OAM is somebody who's been involved with KeraClub since its inception as well, but also Keratoconus Australia. He was diagnosed with keratoconus at age 12 and received a corneal transplant at 18. He went on to complete a Bachelor of Economics with honours and later completed a Diploma of French Language whilst living in France. In 2022, he completed a Certificate of Public Health and Eye Sector Leadership. Larry worked for over 35 years as an economic journalist, first as the Australian Financial Review and later in France, where he co-founded and edited an international newsletter for the energy sector. In 1999, Larry helped create Keratoconus Australia and became its inaugural president, a position he still holds. After 24 years at the helm, he is passionate about need for peer group support in keratoconus. Larry has travelled extensively, played many sports, loves music, Indian food and echidnas, and raised 3 children. He's a constant inspiration. Before we move on to Larry, if we could just have a poll, please, on the attendees who have attended KeraClub before. If Humel could put that up on the screen, just give you a couple of seconds for that. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce Larry. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming along to KeraClub 2024. Tonight I've been asked to talk about what matters to patients with keratoconus. It's an important question because the prevalence of keratoconus is actually rising, and an Australian study recently showed that it could be as high as 1 in 84. The previous speakers have done a great job in outlining all the different treatment and management strategies available to patients, which in many ways represent a tectonic shift in the keratoconus landscape since I was first diagnosed 60 years ago. So you'd think that keratoconus patients today should be content with their lot, and many are. Yet Leo in particular has highlighted some of the critical issues that still arise despite the extraordinary progress made, especially over the past 15 years since the widespread introduction of cross-linking and scleral lenses. We've also heard how keratoconus patients record lower quality of life scores than people with seemingly far worse vision impairment and eye diseases. And so indeed, last week, a patient asked us, does crying affect progression in keratoconus? It's perhaps the saddest question I've heard in 24 years at Keratoconus Australia, and one that shows how far there is to go still. So what still bothers keratoconus patients in particular, and why do some seem to suffer so badly with keratoconus, even a mild form of it? Like everyone, people with keratoconus obviously want good functional vision. After all, sight accounts for 80% of a person's sensory input. Vision impairment is therefore the source of many issues that can seriously impact a person's quality of life at every age and can even reduce the life expectancy significantly due to a range of factors. Not surprisingly, then, loss of vision is the #2 health fear, just behind cancer. So it's a big deal for everyone. But keratoconus differs from many irreversible eye diseases in a number of important ways that matter to patients. Its cause remains largely unknown, and its pathogenesis is not only different in every patient, it also diverges in each eye, something most unusual. It strikes young people at around puberty after they've spent their early childhood growing up with essentially normal sight. The shock of facing a lifetime with compromised vision can be great, as is the sudden transition to becoming a patient in the healthcare system. Although vision loss, especially in the teenage years, can be rapid and severe, patients can find it hard to grasp that early intervention with cross-linking and then contact lenses can greatly mitigate the impact of keratoconus. As Gillian has explained, it's often the quality rather than the quantity of vision that most concerns people with keratoconus. And strangely, although it's a progressive disease, in the absence of eye rubbing, it tends to slow or halt naturally by middle age, even without cross-linking. Although by then, vision loss may be significant in one or both eyes, as it was in my case. And then just as one's keratoconus stabilises, all the other more common sources of age-related vision loss, presbyopia, glaucoma, cataracts, retinal and macular disease all kick in. And then finally, older patients may again suffer vision loss due to keratoconus as they lose their capacity to insert and remove the contact lenses that have provided good vision all their lives. Dry eye may also limit their successful contact lens wearing times, and they may need replacement of old grafts. These often cruel and contradictory factors give rise to an almost infinite combination of hopes and expectations as patients move through a lifetime of keratoconus and age-related vision loss. No wonder patients, especially young, emotionally immature ones, already grappling with the challenges of adolescence, become anxious and fearful about their future and often suffer mental health impacts. So what can be done to alleviate this situation? Well, to start with, better information is of critical importance to patients and their families. Not only does it improve the keratoconus literacy of close family and friends, it can also ease the burden of dealing with an education institution or workplace, which cannot fathom why spectacles are rarely helpful in keratoconus. Early screening. As you've already heard today, cross-linking can significantly reduce the severity of keratoconus in younger patients if they're diagnosed early enough. But clinicians say many patients are still falling through the cracks and not receiving cross-linking soon enough. So there's a pressing need then for more publicly funded community screening for keratoconus, especially amongst adolescents, to ensure that early diagnosis and treatment and vision correction is received as required. And that could entail interventions ranging from targeted school-based eye testing to new mobile phone AI software being used already to diagnose and monitor other conditions. Access to treatments and trained optometrists and corneal surgeons remains unequal across Australia and can cause enormous stress for patients with progressive disease. Probably the greatest single assistance Keratoconus Australia provides to patients, regardless of their issue, is to help them find an experienced clinician in their area. Although there's only a handful in the capital cities, there are even less in the country and remote areas where often eye carers don't have advanced scanners and topographers to provide best practice solutions, or in many areas, any solutions at all. Eye carers also achieve better outcomes for patients when they refer on to the keratoconus experts, even if that means patients travel longer distance for appointments. Scleral lenses have made it easier to fit lenses on keratoconus patients, and better optometrist training in all specialty lenses would increase the supply of optometrists able to fit patients. Of course, finding a specialty contact lens fitter is one thing. Being able to pay for the latest scleral or wavefront designed lenses are often quite another, especially if you have progressive keratoconus, which means today's perfect lens may need to be replaced again tomorrow. So affordability is another key issue for patients. The new specialty lenses often cost 3 or more times the old corneal lenses and need to be replaced every few years. Gillian has foreshadowed another new generation of custom lenses, which could raise prices even more. Patients already pay almost the full cost of these lenses, as even private health insurance barely covers the cost of even one of the very smaller, cheaper corneal lenses. So anyone with progressive keratoconus could find themselves paying thousands of dollars a year for lenses with no assistance available from government. And recent Australian research found that keratoconus patients pay on average 30 times more than other Australians for their eye care. And that figure is probably an underestimate. We're certainly finding that since the widespread shift from corneal lenses to the larger specialty lenses a decade ago, increasing numbers of patients who could previously afford their lenses no longer can. The other thorny issue for patients that has never been addressed by optometrists is that of warranties and particular unsuccessful fits. Warranties can vary widely, and patients may only get a limited number of adjustments to lenses. And what happens then? Often patients are told either to pay for a new lens or to try and live with what they have. Worse is the issue of refunds on unsuccessful fits. Scleral lenses can be hard to handle and have a variety of problems. US data shows patient dropout rates of up to 30%. Now, some of the contact lens fitters offer a 50% refund on the cost of the lenses, not including the cost of visits, while others offer nothing. There needs to be a much greater transparency and consistency on the warranty and refund issues, which cause added stress to patients at a time when their vision is still not adequately corrected. And not to mention the patients who are asked to leave a practice if they're not satisfied with their lenses. What happens to them? In our experience, many optometrists simply don't care. It's impossible to know how many people today are trying to manage with suboptimal contact lenses or even spectacles and struggling day to day with vision simply because they can't afford to renew their lenses. We desperately need more government-funded clinics to supply these specialty contact lenses to low-income and disadvantaged patients, and a clear pathway into the NDIS funding for people requiring these critical vision aids. The situation in ophthalmology is a little different, but sometimes not much better. Since 2018, cross-linking has been covered by Medicare, and that's relieved enormous stress for patients and their families previously unable to pay the often exorbitant fees demanded by surgeons. Thanks to cross-linking, new corneal transplants have become increasingly rare. However, surgeons also offer a range of additional procedures in conjunction with cross-linking that are not fully covered by Medicare and which are not always supported by data confirming their safety and efficacy. Again, patients seeking the best treatments for themselves and their children can be further stressed psychologically and financially by these attempts to upsell them into procedures of debatable value. And finally, there's the issue of informed consent, a legal requirement prior to surgery, but one that is not always fulfilled. For example, how many patients would understand the different protocols discussed here tonight and their outcomes without KeraClub, or be properly briefed on them by their surgeons? Which is why research and data collection conducted by groups like the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry is so important. Dr. Kandel and Professor Watson have discussed the value of registry data, which is being analysed by their students to enlighten the keratoconus community as a whole on what works and what doesn't. And sadly, Australia's pioneering keratoconus research group at the Centre for Eye Research Australia was disbanded earlier this year due to a lack of funding. But more research is also required to find the causes of keratoconus and hopefully one day a cure for vision loss caused by it. Research into AI diagnosis, stem cell treatments, bioengineered corneas all need funding too. And then there's prevention, and that's another important public health issue that requires attention. Eye rubbing is the only patient controllable factor in keratoconus, and some say it's the only factor in keratoconus progression. Over 2/3 of our members admit to vigorously rubbing their eyes at some time in their life. So we believe there's a compelling case for a public health campaign to highlight the dangers of eye rubbing, not just for keratoconus, but other eye diseases like glaucoma. As Sophia said earlier, patients need clear strategies to prevent eye rubbing, especially as it may be the primary cause of the rising prevalence of keratoconus. And all these issues require advocacy on behalf of patients. Until the creation of Keratoconus Australia, there was no one with lived experience to speak to governments or eye carers on behalf of patients. It's therefore critical that more people become involved with the association to ensure its future. So I could go on for hours about what matters to keratoconus patients, but the key takeaway should be that today, vision loss to keratoconus is generally fixable or at least manageable. Cross-linking should minimise that vision loss in the future, and specialty contact lenses and other treatments will provide excellent vision correction. So in the end, what really matters to most patients is being able to access affordable eye carers who understand the challenges of keratoconus, particularly an optometrist who can actually take the time to listen to the individual requirements of each patient and tailor their treatments to their needs and lifestyle and financial capacities. Someone who is prepared to create a strong patient-clinician relationship that may need to last a lifetime. And finally, like any lifetime commitment, the success of that relationship requires patience and compromise by both parties. Hopefully then, people with keratoconus can leave crying behind and regain the joy of life with good sight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Larry, for covering so much in such a brief amount of time, and for everything that Keratoconus Australia does for us as patients. Without that support network, it would be a completely different world. I would now like to move on and introduce Stephanie Watson. Professor Stephanie Watson, OAM, is head of the corneal unit at Sydney Eye Hospital, head of corneal research group at Save Sight Institute, and Deputy Director of Industry, Innovation and Commercialisation, Sydney Nano. Professor Watson was awarded an Order of the Medal of Australia for contributions to ophthalmology and has been with us with KeraClub since its inception. Thank you so much for everything that you do for us as well, Stephanie, and welcome to the panel tonight.
No, thank you very much for the kind words of introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here again, and lovely to hear the words from Larry Kornhauser, head of Keratoconus Australia. So I'm going to present the new patient information brochure for corneal cross-linking. And this brochure is based on evidence. So one of the themes you might have heard is that there are a variety of treatments, and with those treatments, there's a variety of what we call evidence. And by that, we mean the proof that something is effective and something is safe. You've also heard a bit about cross-linking. And just to reiterate, cross-linking aims to stop keratoconus getting worse. The reason why cross-linking is done is to stop progression. If there's improvements in vision, or corneal shape, that's a further bonus, but the main indication is to stop progression. Now, this brochure is available at this website here, and you can scan the QR code to reach the website. As has been mentioned, the brochure was done in conjunction between the Save Sight Registries with the Save Sight Institute and Keratoconus Australia. We have a one-page flyer, the QR code shown here, for this brochure. And the reason for the flyer is the brochure is rather long, and so you may not want to print out the full brochure for your patients, or you may want to just read a brief version of the information about corneal cross-linking. So patients can be given this flyer, or you can read this flyer to find out a brief explanation of corneal cross-linking. But this is the more detailed brochure that we've developed. And I'll just go through it page by page to give you an idea of what the brochure addresses. And in the first page, where we have a nice picture, an intro title page, and then we go into what corneal cross-linking is and just explain the procedure. The next page after that discusses how effective corneal cross-linking is and whether both eyes or one eye will need to be treated. It's also discussed whether cross-linking can be repeated. And then an important question for patients is, what are the risks of cross-linking? Because in deciding whether you should have the procedure to prevent progression of your keratoconus, it's important to weigh up the benefits versus the risks. So we also discuss whether it's worth the risks and how to consider the risks. The next page is addressing the long-term effects of corneal cross-linking. And some of our research has shown that the effects of cross-linking can be quite long-standing, with further improvements after 5 and even 10 years. And also, we address what will happen if you don't go ahead with the cross-linking. So you're trying to decide whether you should have it and what might happen if you delay the treatment. Then if you go ahead with the treatment, we describe what would likely to happen on the day and the different ways that corneal cross-linking may be done. Now, for the most common treatment with the most evidence, that's epithelial off, we describe here the treatment and what will happen during the surgical procedure. We then describe on the next page the recovery and what is the pain like. For epithelium off procedures, because the epithelium is removed to allow greater penetration of riboflavin and therefore more effective cross-linking, it can be quite sore in the first 24 hours after the procedure. And so it's important for patients to understand that this may happen and not to worry. We then discuss what it's like straight after the procedure and whether you need to contact your doctor if you have concerns. Also, some post-op advice about what you can and can't do after cross-linking, when you can drive again, and whether you need to take time off work. This is all very practical information. The other question that comes up often is whether children can have corneal cross-linking. And indeed, it's the children that present with keratoconus that should really be considering cross-linking, because the younger you are and the steeper your cornea, the more likely it is that the keratoconus will progress. So cross-linking should be done in children. It can be done if there's evidence of progression or very high risk of progression, such as very young age. And also, as Larry Kornhauser mentioned, that there is a Medicare rebate available for corneal cross-linking. The final page of the brochure mentions the Save Sight Keratoconus Registry, which is a resource that your optometrists or ophthalmologists can use to track your keratoconus. And you've seen earlier on in the first presentation by Dr. Candle, the graphs that the registry can produce. And with these graphs, your clinician can show you the graphs and you can see the progress of your keratoconus. This QR code up the top is to a small video for explaining the brochure. And the QR code down the bottom is to find out more about the Save Sight registries. It's becoming a bit like a supermarket with all the QR codes. But I'd like to finish by closing and thanking the registries team and Keratoconus Australia for all the work in bringing this brochure together. Thank you very much. I'll just stop my share.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's really wonderful to have a new brochure for all the prospective cross-linking patients. It's very important that we understand what we're about to go into, and the carers as well. We now move on to Amanda Craze. Amanda is our next speaker and our final speaker for the evening. And she's a fundraising professional with over 8 years' experience in the healthcare sector, and recently joined the University of Sydney, partnering with researchers at the Save Sight Institute and working closely with Professor Stephanie Watson to support corneal research. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michelle, for the introduction. I'm delighted to be invited to join the KeraClub this evening and share some insights into the role of philanthropy in research. I'd like to start by sharing the current funding landscape. In Australia, our research is primarily funded through a combination of public and private sources. Public funding comes from government agencies such as the National Health and Medical Research Council and NHMRC, and the Medical Research Future Fund, MRFF. These are competitive government schemes providing grants and fellowships to support researchers. The NHMRC only funds approximately 11 to 13% of all grant applications received, and MRFF is anywhere from 2 to 25%. So from these averages, the success rate for our researchers nationally is an extremely competitive process. This can lead to many talented researchers leaving the sector, taking with them invaluable knowledge and skills built up over many years of work, or research not funded, further reducing the opportunity for a cure. So talking through the challenges researchers face, it's estimated that at least 1 billion people live with preventable vision impairment worldwide. Currently, there are 840,000 people in Australia impacted with vision loss, with prevalence increasing despite 80% of cases being preventable or treatable. And that number is estimated to reach 1 million people by 2030. We know it has been and continues to be very challenging to secure dedicated, prioritised funding for anterior eye condition research. Yet such conditions, one of which is keratoconus, continues to impact an increasing number of individuals globally, about 1 out of 84 people in Australia, as Larry mentioned. There are limited resources available for research, and funding organisations must allocate their time and resources across a wide range of medical conditions and scientific disciplines. Therefore, keratoconus research is competing with other important areas of medical research for funding. The cost of research can be a significant challenge. Cutting-edge research, especially clinical trials or genetic studies, can be very expensive. Lack of awareness can translate into less public support and consequently less funding. So addressing these challenges requires a collaborative effort from government, private sector and non-profit organisations to raise awareness, allocate resources effectively and promote research and development in the field of keratoconus research. So how can philanthropy help? Public advocacy and education are crucial in garnering support for funding research. Non-profit organisations and foundations, philanthropic individuals play a significant role in keratoconus research in Australia. Support from donors can play a hugely important role, and it is vital to bridging the current funding gap. Secure long-term sources of funding help ensure that we attract and retain the best minds. Researchers can shape their research agenda based on the greatest need and the most immediate impact, rather than on available funds. Mid to long-term research projects can be designed and undertaken, which yield more detailed and meaningful data. For example, the Save Sight Registries was established to provide real-world data on keratoconus and other conditions to inform on the outcomes of treatments for keratoconus in the longer term. The work done by the registry also requires funding to train students in research to enable them to provide future solutions to reduce the growing burden from eye diseases such as keratoconus. Secure funding means research can be accelerated as consistent progress is made, so the research isn't start-stop. Philanthropic funding allows researchers to prioritise keratoconus research. With a growing population and an increasing number of people with corneal diseases, and keratoconus one of the most common, it's vital that our researchers are able to continue this important work. So thank you for your time this evening. If anyone would like to learn more about how you can support keratoconus research, please get in touch via the details provided or scan the QR code if you would like to make a donation. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda, for sharing what we can do to help as well. And also, we're now going to move on to our final part of this evening, which is a very important part. And I invite Stephanie, Professor Stephanie Watson, to come and moderate the session of question and answers.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And if I could ask all the speakers to turn their cameras on, and if we can stop sharing the slides, that would be great. I'd also like to mention that there'll be a feedback form that will be in the chat. If you could please give us feedback. The KeraClub is here for you, and so we'd like to know how best to have the KeraClub meet your needs. So the first, while we're waiting for the slides to be adjusted, we did have some pre-event questionnaires, and one was from a patient worried about their corneal graft that was done in 1981 in Germany. And the patient had been told that the graft would only normally last for 25 years. And they were wondering, should they be worried? Now, the Australian Corneal Graft Registry has been collecting outcome data on corneal grafts. And at 10 years, there's an 89% survival rate for grafts with keratoconus. By 20 years, this drops to 49%. So at 20 years, you've got a 1 in 2 chance of your graft still working. At 23 years, it was reduced down a bit further to 17%, so 1 in 5. So you've got a good chance that the graft might still be working, so you don't necessarily need to worry. And if it does fail, there are different ways we can do transplants to bring back the graft. Okay, so now we might go to Jessica. There's a question here. If stage 1 keratoconus patients, it says here, see no results, why crosslink?
So stage 1 disease can still have benefit in terms of improving vision, improving Kmax, but I guess the point of cross-linking is to prevent progression in these patients. So it's there are higher rates of kind of progression despite doing cross-linking in this stage, but it's for some patients who are showing signs of steeper kind of curvature of progression, then that's probably why we would still offer cross-linking for these patients.
Yes, that's right. We're trying to stop progression. The improvements in vision and flattening are a bonus. Thank you. And then Sophia, we have a question here about antihistamines that Zyrtec can cause drowsiness. Can other histamines be just as effective? Antihistamines, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. So there are a few different generations of antihistamines. If you do find that Zyrtec is not effective and does cause drowsiness, there are alternatives. I think the best person actually to speak to about this would be a pharmacist. But yeah, absolutely, there are, in short. Yes,
very good. And Larry, you sort of touched upon this in your presentation, about the costs of treatments and for the individual patient, what can they do? Can they write to their local member? What would you recommend? Become part of Keratoconus Australia to help advocate for this?
Yeah, I think we're at a stage now where we need to advocate because I think we've tried over the last 20 odd years to do something about this, and without the assistance of particularly the optometrists, to get some support in the form of subsidies for the more severe cases as they do in the UK and New Zealand, I'm not sure how as patients we can sort of move the dial on this issue. Our ophthalmologists are obviously need to become involved. Ophthalmologists, from what we can gather, and you'd know more about this, Stephanie, can advocate on behalf of patients to get into the NDIS scheme if necessary. Look, we've done work on setting up the training college at Melbourne Uni that Gillian participates in, which offers an avenue for people with non-health card holders to obtain discounted lenses, and the other teaching clinics and hospitals around Australia also offer that. But yeah, look, getting involved with Keratoconus Australia would be greatly helpful. I might add, just in relation to the other person about the corneal transplants, it's reassuring to know my corneal transplants at 54 years now. So
that's good.
They do last longer.
And Himal, there's a question here about whether patients can access the registry data. Could you want to comment on that?
Sure. Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, the registry is designed to improve patient outcomes. It's definitely for patients, but we do have some ethics requirement. We can't give patients all the data, but the primary clinician, I mean, they can share like patients' past data. I mean, all particular that patient's data, and to educate patient through the graphs or through the outcome reports, they can educate patients and to improve outcomes. But we do have some ethics limitations regarding what you can access.
Yes, we do provide, we do publish the results from the registry, the research papers, and usually we provide a patient version of those, a patient summary, if you like, and that's on the Keratoconus and Save Sight Institute websites. And so you can access the aggregate data and outcome results from the registry.
And just to add one point, we do have regular newsletters from our group where we highlight the research we conduct in lay language so that everyone can understand. And one of the goals of the KeraClubs like this is also to inform patients about like what we find in the data.
Thank you. And Gillian, you've been busy typing away the answers, but just somebody's asking here, what do we do if we catch conjunctivitis when we have advanced keratoconus? So maybe they're talking about when you've got contact lenses and you've got advanced keratoconus.
Yeah, I always recommend if they can reduce lens wear, but I know in certain situations it's not possible because obviously you can't function if you can't see, but putting antibiotic drops in before and after contact lens wear, keeping hygiene, keeping your lenses really clean, changing your pillowcases, because obviously conjunctivitis can be contagious as well. And just keeping lenses clean, changing your case, changing your solution bottles in case, you know, your infection has come from those objects. So if you can, leave your lenses out and for at least like 24, 48 hours at least. But I know that's not realistic for a lot of patients, and, you know, they have to wear them to be able to function. So reducing lens wear time where possible, and yeah, making sure everything's very hygienic, and yeah.
Thank you. And Leo, you know, in your work, what was the sort of the most, you know, interesting or sort of striking thing that you heard about the impacts of keratoconus on the patients?
Well, there were a lot of stories that came to mind. I guess specifically to me, because I related so much to it, really, was a young man telling me about how he just, because I like to play some video games, of course, competitive ones, and he mentioned that he himself had that impacted by his condition. He didn't feel like he could compete as much. There were a lot of stories that going into this research, I didn't expect to hear. Things relating towards, like I mentioned before, about, you know, not wanting to go out at night, someone timing when they would have their dates, for example, because they were self-conscious perhaps about the appearance. But more than that too were also the really good stories about the amount of support that people with keratoconus received from their family, from their friends, and a lot of the resiliency that they gained from their experiences. Things like, you know, like starting work really early so you could just chip in as well. Just being really grateful to your friends who are supporting you and they're driving you to and from places, and the love you have from other people who understand your condition truly. So those were sort of the nicer, like really heartwarming things that I heard.
Lovely. Thank you, Leo. So just to, we have to wrap up shortly. There's some questions where people are wondering about which treatments they should have, or, you know, what might be the best treatment for them. And there is a range of treatments out there with a range of evidence that's emerging on those treatments. And so I would encourage you to discuss the risks and benefits of the treatments, how much evidence there is that they'll work and that they're safe with your optometrists and ophthalmologists. But thank you all for listening, and I'll hand back to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for moderating that session. And I'm sure that there will be further questions that can be answered in various sites that we have linked in with KeraClub too. So we now wrap up this 9th KeraClub session. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending. And I'd very much like to send out a warm thank you to Himal Kandal, Ivy Jiang, Jessica Huang, Leo Fan, Maria Qureshi, Sophia Moshigov, Gillian Campbell, Larry Kornhauser, Professor Stephanie Watson, and Amanda Craze, and all of the people in Save Sight and Keratoconus Australia who have contributed to help this KeraClub continue for these years. And I just want to say that there is so much out there for us, even though, you know, we have to deal with keratoconus every day. There is so much out there for us. And I really do hope that you are feeling positive as well as well-informed after this session. And know that you can reach out to Keratoconus Australia. They have a website, there are phone numbers, and you know, there are people there that are going through the same thing as you are at the same time, and there are inspirational stories as well. Keratoconus is a journey through life, but there are many things that are being done now for us, and the research, of course, and the medical teams that support us, our friends and our family. I just want to say a big thank you.